Hey everybody, Shibby here, and I'm creating an 8-part video series going over all the different groups in the CLOL 2024 season and highlighting the teams in those said groups. We'll be working our way backwards from Group H up until Group A, and it'll all premiere here on Salty Runback. Before we get into the video, I do want to highlight a very important initiative that both Grapes and Hawk are doing for the 2024 CLOL season. So if you haven't heard, or if you've been living under a rock, or if you haven't seen the news, the 2024 CLOL season will not be having an official broadcast from either Riot Games or their partner GG Tech. This is unlike years prior, where in 2023, 2022, and before, there was official coverage with casters, producers, and observers for top 32 up until grand finals. With that information, Grapes and Hawk have decided to crowdfund a fully streamed and fully produced 2024 CLOL broadcast. They are looking to cover the round of 32 all the way up until grand finals. Grapes and Hawk have already raised up to $8,000, and that'll allow them to cover the top 8 portion of the CLOL 2024 season, but they are pushing for the $10,000 goal that will allow them to cover top 16, and if they can push beyond that up to $13,500, that will allow them to cover the top 32 broadcasts up until grand finals. If you care about collegiate, please consider donating. No amount is too little and everything helps. If you can't donate, please think about retweeting it and resharing it through all your social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever you can. Everything helps out. I think it's really important for the CLOL community that every player in top 32 deserves to have their story told. With that being said, let's get into the video. The second group that we'll be talking about is Group G. This group consists of Converse University, University of Florida, Ball State University, and San Jose State University. The first team we'll be talking about is Converse University. They compete in the Peach Belt Conference. They went flawless in the regular season, dropping 0 games, then going into a flawless playoff run, once again dropping 0 games into their championship. Their roster consists of top laner Shysep, jungler Wartrim, mid laner Arrow, bottom laner Devon, and support with the possibly the best name in Collegiate League of Legends this year, Dinosaur Chainsaw, or Dino Chainsaw for short. Their head coach is Zav, previously of Cincinnati Fear, not previously, but currently the GM, previous coach of Cincinnati Fear, and obviously he's the coach for Converse. Now, Converse, and what you'll see with a good amount of these teams in this group, is that they've all won their respective conferences other than University of Florida, and they've won it with pretty much relative ease. A lot of these guys have been picking a ton of different champions almost on random at some points, right? For Converse University specifically, their jungler has been picking a lot of different hard carry picks, things like the Graves, the Elise, the Talia, the Echo, Lee Sin, these kinds of picks. He has a very deep and wide champion pool. You'll see the same thing with their top laner, who picked some stuff like Nasus, their Rengar that they're known for, things like Mordekaiser, Vayne even. This is the kind of common theme you'll see with a lot of the teams here, and Converse University is no exception. The big thing about this Converse University is that their bot lane duo are very, very consistent. If you look at a lot of their stats, if you look at a lot of how they play the game, they seem to be like one of the highest performers, or consistently stand out in performance. So that's something that they can really lean on. They've also got some really interesting flex picks, like the Jax that can go into the jungle or into the top lane. Their Talia can go mid or jungle. Their Lee Sin, surprisingly, has been flexed to mid lane and can also go to the jungle. So they've got a pretty interesting identity. Big question marks around me and for a lot of the teams in this conference is how will their, different comps and all these flexible different champions translate to higher levels of competition. A lot of these teams don't really feel challenged in who they're playing against. You can see a lot of flawless or near flawless runs, and I don't think Converse is any exception. So we'll see how they actually stack up against a lot of these Group B teams, who are a little bit more fallible than the Group A team. The second team we're going to talk about is University of Florida. They're the only team within this group that didn't win their conference. They actually compete in the CLOL South Conference, which has 3 teams qualified, and they are the 4th auto-qualifying team. They went 5-2 in the regular season, then losing 1-3 against UTD in the semis, and then losing 0-3 to Oklahoma Christian in the 3rd place match. Their roster consists of top laner Bacon Lips 999, jungler 610 Momo, mid laner Fireat, bottom laner Note, and support Zawale. This team has some of their own pretty unique identities as well. Bacon can hard carry through the top lane with some of his carry champions. Think Aatrox or the Darius that he's so willing to pick consistently. They'll opt in for a lot of double AD compositions as well, whether that's Corki mid plus Note playing an AD carry, or their jungler 610 Momo playing stuff like Kindred and Graves and pairing that up with whatever AD carry Note decides to pick. 610 Momo has been kind of, like I said, again, picking a lot of different champions. J4, Belveth, Graves, Kindred that we mentioned. He's played Volibear, Wukong, Lilia, a lot of deep champion pools, but he tends to lean towards Graves, Kindred or the J4 Vi depending on what the team composition asks for. I think another thing is that, you know, Fireat, their mid laner, tends to be put into the more supportive mid roles or more like, you know, non-interactive stuff, things like the Karma, the Hui, but does have a really good Ahri and Azir when needed, and has his cool pocket picks like an Annie, like an Swain that we've seen in some of these matches. Note is a pretty consistent carry for this team. Good chunk of compositions around this University of Florida team are designed to enable one of the two or two of the two AD carries that they tend to pick in these games. So, you know, things like Aphelios, Xayah, Varus, Zeri. I mean, he's also played stuff like Vayne and Jinx and this kind of stuff. He's a very good fundamental AD carry player, and I think it really works into the favor of what University of Florida likes to do with these double AD carry compositions. Their support, Zawale, has some cool pocket picks. He will play a ton of Pyke and Zyra more often than you think, and has cool AD carry specific pairings with their laner Note. Things like the Caitlyn Lux, or maybe they'll play like Caitlyn Karma. Sometimes they'll play Seraphine. They'll go for these like really weird, wacky lanes, even the Zyra that I mentioned, to try to get an advantage. So I think University of Florida, they suffer from the fact that they actually just compete in a pretty decently competitive region. Like the top three teams, Oklahoma Christian, UTD, and UST are all very, very good teams. And obviously two of them, you know, could make a run for that title if you believe that UTD is a top 8 team like some of the committee did. Yeah, University of Florida, they're probably the strongest team within this group, but they're the only team that unfortunately couldn't win their conference because of how competitive it is at the top side. Our next team we'll be talking about is Ball State University. They compete in the Esports Collegiate Conference, or the ESC Conference for short. They went 12-1 in the regular season, and they had a first round bye, going 3-1 in both of their playoff victories in the semifinals and grand finals. Their roster consists of top laner Silk, jungler Boatlick, mid laner Wombat Baby, bot laner Gerald, and support Minsu. Their bottom lane specifically explores a lot of interesting Senna pairings, more than what I've seen from some of the collegiate teams that I've been watching and studying. They'll pair like mages, bruisers, tanks. Like Minsu and Gerald will both play things like the Camille. They'll play Karma with Senna fasting. They'll play Wukong with Senna fasting. Both of these guys will play the Tahm Kench depending on who's gonna play the Senna. Like they have all these weird and wacky pairings in the bot lane, and I feel like they've really kind of explored what they can do with Senna and how many different kind of pairings they can put down in that bottom lane. Silk performs very well on his carry top laners. He plays a lot of Fiora, Yone, will play stuff like the Kennen, and generally looks for these carry top matchups and looks for general advantages. Has a Gwen that they can bust out into tanks and stuff like that, but mostly the Fiora Yone is what I've seen him just kind of pop off on. Wombat has a pretty cool champion pool with the Ziggs and the TF. Lots of Ahri and Orianna. Will kind of hang on to the Karma and the TF if he needs to play a more like supportive initiative mid, right? If his top laner has picked something hard carry, if his bottom laner has picked something like very, very interesting. But he can just 1v9 on the Ahri. Has had monster performances on this champion. So it, you know, might be one of those things where if the Ahri gets banned out, he can kind of pick up some of these supportive champions, or he can kind of just plug and play the Ahri with whatever composition they feel like. Each of these players have about 1 to 2 champions where they can 1v9 on, right? Fiora Yone for top lane, Nidalee specifically for their jungler Boatlick and even the Graves, Ahri for Wombat, Varus for Gerald as well, and then the Senna, both for Minsu and Gerald, can have hard carry performances. This is one of those teams that can flex around the carry load depending on who wants to carry, what champions are being picked. So it's very interesting to see like how flexible they are in giving that carry responsibility to pretty much every member of the team, given what game they're playing and what champions they're on. The final team that we'll be talking about, and my alumni San Jose State University. They compete in the Mountain West Conference. They went 6-1 in the regular season and then had a flawless playoffs run. Their roster consists of top laner Mountains, jungler Evan Lai, mid laner Went, bottom laner TT, and support Mock. Out of all the teams in this group, San Jose State probably has the most stable identity. Their mid laner will play a lot of hard scaling picks. Think Vigar, Asol, that kind of stuff. They have a tank top player in Mountains who, by his name, will play stuff like Ornn, Udyr, Malphite. They have a very carry jungler orientated player. Evan Lai will play stuff like Brand, Viego, Shaco has picked, Kindred, that kind of stuff. And then, you know, their bottom lane will play for these like early pushing lane advantage stuff. Things like the Karma will be played out from their support player Mock very consistently, right? Will play the tank supports, but really leans towards that Karma. And then TT, one of the only AD carries that significantly plays a decent amount of Kate and Jhin, will just look for those, you know, AD carry pushing poke lane advantages. So their identity seems very stable, but to me, they have a set kind of strategy that they have in place, and they have really been refining that and practicing that. They do have a couple wacky picks, right? We talked about their jungler Evan Lai. He does have a Rengar, he does have an Ivern that he's willing to play, as well as Mountains, although being a predominantly tank player, does have a pocket Jax pick when needed. Mid laner Went is probably the most stable player. I feel like hasn't really been challenged on his champion pool. Tons of Aurelion Sol, tons of Vagar. Has busted out the odd Jace and Rumble mid when needed. So that's a flex between their top laner and their mid laner, both of those champions. But I think this bottom lane is really interesting because typically when you see these kind of teams that play these like pushing bots, that play these really aggressive bot lane pairings, when they get to higher competition, a lot of the better bot lanes know how to play against it, and they won't give away the same advantages. They won't, you know, get pushed in early, give like 3-4 plates. So it'll be interesting to see how this team adapts and how all these teams adapt. I think the best way to categorize Group G is that it's big fish, small pond scenario, where 3 out of the 4 teams in this group have won their conferences and are number 1 in their conferences. But when they qualify and when they get placed and when they get seeded, they don't actually stack up against a lot of the higher competition that well. In similar vein to Group A and Group H, not actually having a lot of round of 32 teams come out, Group G still has a very tough road ahead of them. I described Group H and A games as like 90-10. You could argue Group G and Group B teams are maybe like 80-20 or 85-15 in that regard. So it's still a lot of tough roads ahead of them. And especially when you come from a team that wins all the time or wins their conference and then you step up to the next level, it can be very disheartening knowing that maybe you're not that close to what the top 8 looks like. That wraps it up for our Group G overview. I think a lot of these teams are better than the Group H teams. They have that winning mentality. They've obviously won their conferences, and University of Florida plays against a lot of these top teams. So they are the essence of iron sharpens iron. And although they can't really take down a lot of those top teams, they might upset one of the more fallible teams in Group B. It's definitely still upset city. I would watch out for these guys. They play a lot of weird, wacky champions. They have a lot of flexibility in who they want to play, what they want to play. It's just interesting to see if Group G teams will refine some of their certain styles and, you know, maybe default to global meta, or they'll stick to their guns and be like, you know what, we can play the Echo Jungle. We can play Shaco. We will play like Karma or Senna Yasuo or these weird pairings that we have, and just kind of stick to their guns against these Group P teams, which is what I'd like to see, because that's how you get a win, in my opinion. If you're Group G, you don't conform to what global meta is or what's naturally strong. You play what got you that #1 win in your conference, and you just hope that they're not prepared for it, they don't understand it, and you can play your game better than they can play their game. In our next video, we'll be going over Group F, which includes 4 vote-in teams that are USC, University of Waterloo, Ottawa University, and Colorado Boulder. I'll see you soon.